Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Lives. Really excited and delighted today to have with us Lowell Johnson. I met Lowell at 3 o'clock in the morning. Yes, 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up, could not go back to sleep, happened to flip open my phone as I usually do to listen to a podcast. And the very first YouTube video on there was of Lowell Johnson with, I think it was a Ethereal podcast,
Ethereal Edge.
Ethereal Edge. I couldn't remember the name of it. Ethereal Edge podcast. And the title said something like, I visited a 36,000-year-old Lemurian civilization under Mount Shasta. Now, if that doesn't get your attention at 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't know what does. Um, and I stayed awake through that whole podcast listening to Lowell's story, which was absolutely fascinating. And then I emailed him the next day and shared with him a little bit about what was going on in our lives and what mystical experiences were happening. And we had a Zoom chat for your channel. What is your channel called?
It's just Lowell Johnson, but Starbuck Lightworker, you can find it kind of in the title either way.
Mhm. Okay, cool. So Lowell has a podcast as well where he interviewed folks. Well, he interviewed me for his podcast, which was fun. And so now we're doing the exchange, and I'm interviewing him for you guys, our what I call our Casa Angels. We do this. The Casa Angels are people who support our work financially to help us create this healing center and sacred space in San Luis. So anyway, we're interviewing him today. I'm delighted to introduce you guys to him because he's a really fun energy. And so let's start out. Welcome first, Lowell. And I
Thank you for inviting me. This will be fun. The last one was fun, but they all are.
I
We get to touch on topics that there aren't a whole lot of people in our circle that are at this level of awareness. And I don't want to blanket that in some way that we're going to touch on things that people won't understand. Trust me, if you're listening to this, you already resonate with the topics that we're going to cover.
absolutely.
We just have our own experiences to share. And what I've learned over a while, I kept expecting that when people showed up, Susan, to share their stories with me, that I was going to find lots of synchronicities and crazy coincidences, which I did, but not the way I thought they were going to be. I thought I was going to be here about other people that went to Telos in their own way, because I won't be the only one. That wasn't what happened. Did I end up with a tribe of people that showed up that clearly we've all resonated in other lives together? There's something just familiar with us. But our stories are all vastly different. Well, if we understand that the lessons we signed up for and our particular little journey wasn't like anybody else's. Even if you had a twin, the twins aren't following the same things and learn the same lessons. So why should we expect to? Once we understand that and we start to get a hold of some kind of crazy awareness of information, we think at first is new stuff that we're getting, but very profound. After a little while, you realize you're just cracking into things in your own awareness. Your own little Akashic records are coming back and being restored. And we all understand the reasons why and why it seems to be at a rate that's accelerating and just keeps doing so.
Very good. Um, which, as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I suspect he lived in Telos before, or there was a past life there, or you are that soul essence. Do you know what I mean? From
Yes.
and we'll get into that down the road, folks. We can once we get going, we get going. But let's start sort of at the beginning because I'm really interested in your journey as sort of ordinary. that turned into extraordinary, of how you got to this point, that you came to this nexus point of being, having this experience. So tell us how you got to there. What's that journey to that point where the world changed for you?
If I look back from where I am now on what happened in my life and all the things along the way, it wasn't that I wasn't curious about something bigger than myself. But I don't want to go back to the beginning and explain the nature of, my family and all that. But I will. There was some significant things in just given time right now. Let's just start when I think this all really kicked into gear. And that would have been in late 2015 and the very beginning of 2016. I've been relatively healthy all my life, was athletic, played hockey into my 50s until it just wasn't convenient with me moving around the country so much anymore. But I'd always been active. But my last couple of um, consulting gigs, and they're hospitality related, were in Louisiana. And I love Cajun food and Creole food, but it tends to take its toll on your weight. And it did in my case. Anyway, um, when this had all happened, um, I had some symptoms right before Thanksgiving that I had misdiagnosed myself as just, my arms kind of, how when they just fall asleep and, you get that little tingling. Well, I misread when that happened in my left arm on a Sunday afternoon when I was going into one of the assets we were managing and just to kind of look in on the staff and, maybe if I had to break somebody for lunch. Wasn't a day I typically worked, but where this was 5 minutes from the house. And on the way there, I got that tingle in my left arm. As I went in to this little general store we had, I went behind the counter and I was, kicking up a conversation with Lisa, the person that was there that day. And whatever I had in my mind would not come out of my mouth without sounding like it was garbled. And it was unsettling to me. When I tried to repeat to say it again, the problem just got worse. So all of a sudden, I just shut down because I didn't want somebody overhearing me trying to speak when I couldn't. I lasted maybe another 10 or 15 minutes thinking to myself, I'm just going to go home for the afternoon and I'm going to lay on the couch and just, let this process. Because that's all I thought it was. I didn't understand. Well, we got to about Wednesday of the next week, and there was another visit we were going to have for another asset nearby. And this time I was walking around this particular building with an architect. It was an old hotel on the Pacific coast that had a restaurant and a bar. And we were looking to restore it, but maintain its historic values. This architect had expertise in that area. And so I was touring the property with him when I want to say it was like 11 o'clock. We're outside, and all of a sudden, my left eye goes out of focus. And it's not that I hadn't done that before. I was a kid. I used to cross my eyes all the time and just like to play with people that way. But this time, after a few moments, it wouldn't correct itself. So now I'm getting, I don't want to say terrified of the word that came into my mind. It wasn't to that degree, but I knew I needed some attention. And I had always resigned myself to my body will heal itself. As this was all kind of coming into awareness, we'd stepped back into the building and I ran past one of my partners. And she said, God, you don't look good. And I said, I don't feel good. So by now, I had reached out to the doctor, who, I don't go to the doctor, but in this case, I've been in the area long enough so that I could establish one if I needed one. And fortunately, he had time to see me. So I drove in myself. My spouse at the time was laid up because she had just had a rotator cuff surgery. So she was in no position to be able to help me. So I drove in 90 minutes into town, had my tests done. As soon as the doctor saw me, he threw me in for a battery of tests that afternoon. And by the time I was on my way back home, so this was Wednesday, he had already reached out to my wife and informed her that we're setting up surgery for Lowell on Friday. And tomorrow, I've got an appointment with a surgeon that I'm going to see who's actually going to conduct it because they're concerned. I had a certain amount of blockage in my carotid artery, right where it meets the brain. Um, and it just needed to be addressed. The concern was that whatever plaque buildup there might break off and become an aneurysm in the brain. So that's why they were more interested in taking care of it immediately. But when I saw the surgeon the next day, he said, there's some trauma in there. And I just assume that we let that kind of sort itself out first before I go in there and start to do what I'm going to do. So he said, I want to put this off for like 2 weeks, give it a chance to heal. If you have another issue, you go into the hospital right away, they'll know what to do. But this is the way I think it would be best to handle it. And he was right in the end. So the first weekend in December, I go in to have this process done. Um, I'm in the hospital for 3 days, and he advises me that you're going to be recovering for the next 30 days. So you might as well just get used to the idea you're going to be on the couch and you shouldn't really be doing anything. And he mentioned that among the things that you might want to consider for therapy might be, meditation. Well, I'd always been interested in it, and the times I had practiced with it, either I didn't devote enough time to it, or I just hadn't found the right fit. But here, I got 30 days. I'm going to see what I can't find. I tried everything I can find on the internet, and it wouldn't be until kind of the end of the month when I would watch The Secret for the third time. And in it, of course, they make references to transcendental meditation. So I started to do my research on the availability of trainers in my area. And when you really understand there's no coincidence to anything, and there's not a trainer on every corner in every town. I lived in Santa Rosa, California at the time, and it turned out the trainer lived like a mile from where I was. So it was just like all this lined up. The process for transcendental Mediterranean is the same for everyone. Every initiate goes through the same 4 consecutive days. The first day is 90 days or 90 minutes. And then the third or the 3 consecutive days are 60-minute sessions. By the second day, I felt something shift. I found this trainer by mid-February, and I could just tell that it shifted. By day 4, I was thinking that if I benefited from this way, that this is what others should know about too. And even my trainer saw something in me. She said, I could see you training other people how to do this. And that's what I thought my path was going to be. And so I began taking the advanced courses that they had to get myself ready because after you satisfied these other mid-range courses, then you're going to go do 5 months in Thailand where you'll really be trained. And by March of the following season, you'll be ready to train people in the same way Maharishi trained everybody. It's all the same. The only thing that differs, and the only thing I couldn't find in the past, was this mantra everybody's trying to tell you about. Well, your mantra is different for everybody. Think of it as your trainer finds your soul tone, your individual frequency. This phrase is his articulation of that sound that is your frequency. And that's what you use during these times when your mind starts to wander. You introduce the mantra and it brings you back into that space. I can tell you it works. And over time, the process for TM is recommended twice a day, 20 minutes a day. And that's really a training process. you're practicing. If you get yourself to do that consistently, you'll just find it becomes part of who you are. And sooner or later, although you will still do that because after you get into those meditative states, it's the only place you want to be. In my case now, I don't do it twice a day, but religiously, the first time, from the moment I get up in the morning, the next 20 minutes is spent in that meditative state. And so my day begins from that platform, and the rest of my life just kind of flows like that. Um, so that would have been 2016. I continued to consult for the next couple years, and I had been in Baton Rouge in the meantime. I was back in California. And so after this happened, there's an opportunity for me to go back to this consult I did in Baton Rouge again in 2018. So this is 2 years after really this process has begun, and I've got 2 years of meditative process under my belt. During the period of time this is taking place, I can tell my vibration is rising. I am in tune with things. My senses are more acute than they've ever been. I have access to thoughts that are more profound than ever came out of my head before. And I start to jot these down. Now I've got hundreds of these things that I've written down over time. Did they come from me? Maybe originally, but in my little 3D mind, they did not. That's why I jotted them down along the way. Um, when I,
Question.
yes,
Originally go into meditation for your health, or did you have any clue that meditating would take you or introduce you to, would you call it an unseen world, or do you know what I mean? Something
I
different.
see. Yeah, I understand your question. That was not my motivation, was to get to things greater than myself. Really, what provoked it, if you want to see it that way, was my doctor's recommendation. And it, like I said, it wasn't something I wasn't curious about, but it all of a sudden it just seemed like the table was set. Oh, Lord, you got nowhere else to go. And here are some resources for you to begin. So when I start to think back and see these dots line up, here is when I can begin to really understand there's no coincidences to any of this. And the people that are beginning to cross my path, and they all seem to be rather like-minded, there's this isn't without coincidence either. Um, So in 2018, I get curious about other ways to, reach source, spirit, however you want to see it, label it. And I had curiosities about ayahuasca. Now, in a perfect world, it seemed you would find an indigenous shaman in the jungles in Peru, um, and have these experiences from shamans that have had it handed down generations to generations and in that environment. I did a lot of research, listened to lots of people that have been through the process, what their intent was going into it, what they got out of it on the other end, what seemed to be purged in the process. And it's not, it's there is nothing recreational about it, and there's nothing about it going into it without intent that you would just be given up a measure of control when you don't have any in the first place. Anyway, make a long story short, I had an opportunity to do that over a weekend in California and radically changed things in my field. Told me things about myself that would be introduced to me 2 years later. And I knew could only come from one source because that phrase was only uttered then. It began to help me see things from this higher plane and perspective. And here is where this whole idea of straddling dimensions actually begins. So I'm still working, but there's two people in this casino company I work for of 450 employees that I can have these conversations with. One of them happened to be the director of compliance. So she was reading a book about the fall, and I don't know how she came across it, but and I don't even know how we started on the conversation. But she'd asked me something about it one afternoon, and that night I was so triggered by it, I went downloaded the book, read it, and the next morning had an answer for her. Now I don't know how I came up with that, but oh yes, and it satisfied her. So we both that morning kind of looked at one another, and went, I'm not quite sure what this is about, but it sure resonates. And so from that point on, and I was getting compensated well. I was making six figures a year, and the benefits to work for a casino company at a director level are pretty good. I liked the community I was in and the association of people that I got to know. It was just more tribe, but something was just nagging me that you're supposed to be doing something else somewhere else. And it'll be the first part of December at the end of 2019 that I'll just give into it. So I'm ready to resign. They don't need me to resign. They don't really want me to resign. I'm there to help a riverboat based casino move on land. It's finally become possible to do that in Louisiana. And this place has been there forever. So all the things are in alignment now. They've called in people with different particular expertises. Mine happens to be in non-gaming, so hospitality. I'm going to help renovate a 300 room hotel, and there's tons of food and beverage and sales venues that just need attention. And so I was going to get to be part of that transition. I love that kind of project. I like to take something that needs to be polished a little bit or fixed and turn it into something really cool. And this was the opportunity. But I was going to leave before it was in completion because I was going to go somewhere else. And so I gave them 6 weeks notice. And my last day was actually going to be like the first Friday in February. In the meantime, in September, I'd finally taken some time off and I took a trip to Vegas. And while I was there, thought if I was going to reload, would I think about moving here? Well, most of the consulting work I was getting was from companies based there. And so I thought, well, I could live there and then go from anywhere. So I had found a place I liked. And in January, reached out, made an offer, put down, some escrow money, and had intended the week after Valentine's Day to close and then reload. Well, there was time in between the time I left Baton Rouge and the time I was supposed to close in Nevada. And I thought I was going to go visit my son for a week in California before I would close in Vegas. So this is the middle of February 2020. On the drive from Louisiana to California, my guides then are fully engaged and they're nagging me not to close on the house. Well, this is something that I thought I really wanted and that I had it looked like that was the path I was taking. So by the second day, I called my realtor, and although I was within this 30-day window, so whatever escrow money I had was going to be sacrificed, I gave her the news that I wasn't happy about. So once I got to my son's, I think it was the second day I was there, COVID locks all of us down. No one's going anywhere. So I understand what had happened up to that point that I thought was a level of disappointment. I understand now what's going to happen. So between February and the end of June, when conditions seemed to relax, I had plenty of time to dive into all kinds of esoteric things and had an opportunity in June to really, I found a source I trusted for past life regressions, one that could help me with Atlantis, because that was the one that was foremost in my mind. And I got that help in the middle of June. You can't really learn about the Atlanteans without understanding something about the Lemurians. But that was the extent of my Lemurian knowledge, wisdom, at least at that time that I had access to. And nowhere in any of this so far, Susan, was the word telos even uttered. Knew nothing about it. So,
So it wasn't in your
uh,
radar. It wasn't in your radar. You didn't even, did you even know about Mount Shasta? Did you even,
yes, I'd driven by it in the past. But there was what was about to take place is once that those conditions relaxed and you weren't locked down to your house too much, I just needed to get out in nature. And it was just me. So all I wanted to do was hop in the car and go find somewhere out there that I knew I could connect with something bigger. And my target was in the Southwest because I'd been to that area before. And in the Four Corners area of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, tons of national parks that I'd been there before and would return to in a heartbeat. But as I was starting to make plans and looking at social media, lots of those parks weren't even open. And so the next thought in my mind immediately was Mount Shasta. I don't know who planted it there or why, but it looked like it made sense to me because really I didn't have to drive to the Southwest from Santa Rosa. Mount Shasta was 4 hours. So I get there in the morning or an afternoon. And although I had driven by it a couple times um, and I was fascinated by it, I'd never been there. I'd kind of heard some kind of thing about people talked about there's some kind of magic there. But all it had to be was outdoors and forest, and I was good to go. I had no idea what kind of water features there were and the number of waterfalls and all that, and won't really appreciate until I get there and get my boots on the ground on the mountain that what I was actually seeking were energetic, call them vortexes. That's what I was looking for. I didn't go where with the intent that I was going to run into an ascended master in the forest. But we know that's certainly what Saint Germain had done before. And I won't be the first person that's gone to that area and had these profound experiences with beings that people might not think are real. But once you have these experiences, you can't unexperience that. And then when it's repeated, you just hope that others are going to come along that have had similar circumstances so that you can actually share these things. So, my intent was to visit Shasta. This was right around the first part of July. So I think I waited until the day after the 4th of July and then went, I was going to go for at least a week. And then I was going to contact my son, and he and I might go to Tahoe or Reno and just get outside. So after the first week, there I was having the time of my life, and I hadn't gone to the same place twice yet. And I had a lot of the things I had heard about that I wanted to go visit. So I reached out to my son. I said, I feel like staying longer. There's just something here that I want to continue to explore. Well, it didn't matter to him. He said, stay as long as you want. So by the end of the second week, I will have an appreciation for some type of palpable energy that physically you can't ignore, but I wasn't aware of. By the end of that week, I had seen this other couple about my age that I'd kind of seen during the course of the week. They were hiking there too, and our paths would cross from time to time. And so this was Friday, and clearly they were saying their goodbyes to the mountain. And I could kind of overhear them talking about this physical energy. And at that moment, I finally got it because I had been hiking every day, Susan, like I was in my 20s. Elevation changes and crazy stuff, where at my age, I should have had a day in between for each one of those energetic hikes, but didn't. Wouldn't be until 2 weeks later that I recognized you didn't stop for a day, Lowell. You just kept going. Um, I learned early, though, in my hikes, um, to do the uphill part of your hikes at the beginning of the day, so that at the end of the day, you're not going back uphill. Yeah. Anyhow, um, before this visit is over, I will have stayed for 5 weeks. And by the last weekend in July, the vortex is going to open up for me to visit Telos. That's the quick, fast answer to what happened. But it won't be until months later that I will appreciate that during the time that I was there, my vibration was being changed. It was being, it rose by the conditions that I was in and by the time it was supposed to happen, my vibration was at such a level that it matched theirs. And that's how you get in from this particular stage. So believe my story or not, I'm telling you, if you raise your vibration, you will experience everything at that level of awareness. And there's lots of it around us that we're just blind to because our attention goes elsewhere. Once you have the chance to just focus on those things, they make themselves known. And there's a reason that I don't need to tell you why all this is accelerating. There is a reset for the planet that is right around the corner, and we are adapting to the change. Some of us, however it happened, thank God it did for me, became aware of this energetic change that's taking place, and I feel it. Man, over the last few days, there's been a coronal hole stream that sent geomagnetic storm conditions on the planet over a 2.5 day period. So think about what happened to your body over the last few days. If you've had some crazy sensations that you really couldn't account for in any other way, I'm telling you that this isn't the first time that the sun and her um, influence on the earth has changed and affected your sentient body. No one really trained us to look for those things, but I've been studying the sun now for a couple years, and we're in a period of solar maximum. We are taking more plasma from the sun than we have in a long time and have had record levels of that type of engagement. It's the cause for every earthquake that you've heard about, every tsunami that was resulted from it, every flood, every strange weather condition you're hearing about all on the planet. The only thing that's amazing to me is that I really wonder whether this has happened in the past. Because 100 years ago, we did not have the technology that we have today to be able to spot and measure these phenomenon going on. Oh, but we can see it for exactly what it is right now. Now, whether we're smart enough to adapt as humans to these changing conditions, we'll see. Um, Part of me tells me that there are those that aren't going to get it. The idea that the earth was going to ascend when we did, when humanity's consciousness broke whatever mold was and attained 51%, we were the catalyst that changed that. Let me be the one to straighten that out. Earth is on a cosmic cycle of her own. She is a sentient being all to herself, and she is in an evolution. And right now, she is only has so much of her left in the third density because more of her is moving into the fourth dimension permanently. And once she's there, she no longer supports lower vibrations. And so, those of us that have been used to this third level density, the lessons we were here to learn in this little duality experiment are over, and we're moving into newer earth. It's clear to me all of the signs that when it had been suggested to me, when I really couldn't understand the concept that well, that there were parallel timelines going on. And now we've come to the part where they're splitting. Well, the idea that um, Earth is like a cell going through mitosis. And this part over here is the third dimensional density going in this way, off to entropy sooner or later. And this one is the one that's rising in consciousness, and the vibrations rising, and that's new Earth. We have all adapted to that frequency. We feel it, we know where it's going, and man, are we ready for that. But you can still see the other faction who wants to focus on separation and all those parts of duality that, good or bad, was part of the plan. It was part of going into separation only to come back into unity. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Fourth dimensional astral plane is where we all understand the nature of we're connected to everybody else. And all of our benefits come from there. We dipped into this space to have these experiences so that really, if we believe we are sparks of source, which I believe wholeheartedly, we came and pick those unique lessons to understand and help it more learn more about itself. Nobody is learning the lessons you learned. Nobody did in the past. Nobody has at this point. Your lessons are unique. Mine are unique. We have been through this reincarnation cycle now for a while, perfecting these lessons, but we're done. And so is the earth. So there are still some that don't get it yet, and they're not done playing out their third dimensional lessons. All I can offer for those people is that they'll find a way to do that. The universe isn't without resources to do that, but they are not associated with New Earth. And we are like a field goal away from being in that new vibration permanently. I feel it. It's coming, and I'm not the only one. That's the beauty of finding the rest of the tribe, is their head all goes like this when you start to talk about this energetic stuff that's changing. And now we begin to understand better what the heck we were doing here. It was funny. I did a follow up with the Ethereal Edge with Tara the other day, and it dropped. And one of the comments one of the girls made, because I had made the observation that during this period of time that's been going on for a few years now, every time I went to a space, I recognized that I was a light worker. I didn't say it out loud for a long time because it just didn't, it's not the way I'm built. But I do understand what that means. And what I do, when I went to Shasta, I wasn't going there to get something from the mountain. I certainly did, because in those energy exchanges, oh, there's always something in exchanges. My job is to anchor light there. It's to pull it down and anchor it in that very spot and leave it for somebody else to sense. And I've always said, after I've done that, I dare you to walk through that aura and not be affected by that. Well, it made some of these other people begin to think what they had been doing too. They've been going to places on the planet out, off trail, and they had these sensations with elementals and just nature, and they didn't appreciate that they were anchoring their light there. They came away with a whole new perspective of what you've been doing and the purpose for that. This idea that there are parts of the planet that are still, we're not done with the catastrophic processes that are going on the surface. but there is a lot of effort that's been putting into preparing these areas that I know to be called golden tie allotments. They have been predisposed to these higher vibrations, and every time a light worker visits it, they just anchor in more light in those areas. There is a common list that lots of people will understand if you've heard Shasta and Sedona and Egypt and Greenland and Ayers Rock in Australia. You've heard about many energetic areas that people have visited. Those are already predisposed to those areas. And to me, these days, it's really comical for me to hear stories about people that share. Um, there was one woman who lived in Wales, and when she was done with her teaching career, it was just her and her husband. She had this sense to go to Glastonbury. She didn't understand why, but she was going through this change from the 3D world where she was teaching people. All of a sudden, there was additional information and wisdom she was coming upon. And then she just found this impulse and she just needed to move to Glastonbury. I've heard the same story told about somebody who used to live in Missouri with a small family, and all of a sudden they uprooted and moved to Hawaii. Now, if you understand that process in the first place, that's not a simple thing. They own property in Missouri, so you have to sell that. And then how do you find a place to live in Hawaii? Within 6 months, they did. So when you continue to hear stories like that, you understand who these people are and what their purposes are, even though at first they might have understood what their presence was doing there. And once you've established that connection with Gaia, because that's what we do first, and we're here to assist her, others end up showing up. They still don't understand why, but when that initial work had been done, more attraction came to the area. And I'm hearing reports of it all over the place. The newest places that surprised the crap out of me is the Czech Republic. Now, it wasn't that I didn't have people who showed up from English speaking countries. And then I had some people who showed up listening to podcasts from Croatia and Romania. And the last was the Czech Republic. Little Helena had heard the same podcast on Ethereal Edge that you had heard and was so taken by it, she copied it and translated it for her audience in the Czech Republic, where it had 15 or 20,000 views of its own. And so last Saturday, we finally did a live session. We've tried to do these in the past, and we've been successful here in English speaking countries, but I had never been or even asked to do one where I needed a translator. But can you see where this is all going? Yes. They not only wanted that, they found the Ascension Handbook on my website. Bless their hearts, that's what it was for. So now they're working on translating that into their own language. Yes.
Um, I was fascinated by the discussion of traveling to different places, which is what Spirit did for Milton and I when I had my spiritual awakening. They moved us to Virginia Beach, Virginia. Then they moved us to Sedona. And then they moved us to Australia and we visited Ayers Rocks. We went to, then they called us to go to Bosnia, Medjugorje, Bosnia, because the energy there is off the charts.
Yes.
And that's where I engaged with Mother Mary, and that's where I met her. We went to Brazil. Um, so I guess I've never put that piece together before about how we were moved to these different places. We lived in Byron Bay, Australia, which my understanding is a sister city of Sedona. And now it's starting to make sense. I know I have to go to Mount Shasta, but the timing isn't right, where I'm free to do that yet.
Right.
But I know that's a place I have to go. And then for another one is, for some reason, Devil's Tower in Wyoming. But
Yeah.
I really appreciate you putting that together about us bringing the light workers. receiving from energy from these places, but also bringing our energy to these places as well.
That's what we do. We just think that we're supposed to be getting something from outside of ourselves all this time. And once I began to understand that I had physically been given some light upgrades that were photographed. And I remember the sensation of what happened and what I carry after that. Now I see that happening for everybody else. So I know that I carry that. I've been really delighted in some interactions that I've had with authentic people who are, I consider them tribe. They're on the same wavelength. But they've been in this metaphysical world for decades. And there's one in particular I met um, in Sedona while I was there. And she has a great reputation. You can tell that she is connected to things way beyond herself, and she has helped other people get there. So after a couple interactions, when she reached out to me and asked, "Do you work with others?" Which I didn't at the time. And what do I have that I'm carrying? She goes, "There's something that you have for me that I'm supposed to get from you." So when you begin to hear that from people like that, that's when you start to look at what you've been given in a whole different way. And the idea that we've been given light and upgrades that we weren't carrying just for ourselves, we were going to pass that along to others in ways that was unconscious to me. On other levels, that people are getting something from me that I now have a sense of what you're getting. But when it first began, I wanted to understand. Can you tell me what exactly it is you think you're getting? Because I would really like to know what that is. I've been told along the way that I was holding something for others, and that when the time came, it would. And I'm just wondering if this is it. So we'll see. When it's happened with more than one person that I am just, I respect authentically, that's when it got my attention. And so every time I go to another place, think of this as an exchange. Yes, you're leaving just like every crystal you ever pick up. You're going to get something from the interaction with that crystal, but you're also leaving your imprint behind in exchange. It's always an energy exchange. It's no different when you visit these sacred places. They have stuff waiting for you to get, but you're going to leave something of yourself behind as well. And once we begin to understand that, then I get the idea of when we do these things on Zoom, there's a light that just kind of went out to everybody in the Zoom platform. And now they're going to carry it into their circles and illuminate that hub. You know what I mean? That's how I see it happening.
That's really interesting. And then one more place we did go was England, and we traveled the Archangel Michael and Mary ley lines all the way up through England and ended up in Glastonbury and Avebury and Stonehenge. So it just never. I knew it was like spider webs. Do you know what I mean? Of energy
Yes.
bringing back and taking and that kind of thing. But
You're beginning to sense the grid work on the planet. And that is what I'm squarely plugged into. I was seeking out the energetic things on the planet before I knew what I was doing. And that's the archive that I have inside of me. It's been wonderful to interact with people. But what I carry away are the places I've been to and what happened while I was there. At first, I thought it was up to me to share everything so that others would see it's okay to share their experiences. And over time, that idea became tempered. There's a lot of people that do resonate with this, and those are the ones that show up. And really, that's all I care about. I didn't care if I ever was attracted to tens of thousands, it didn't matter. I was talking to Dave Wallace about this yesterday, and both of us had kind of come to the conclusion that we're here to help. and we're going to share the experiences we have with our tribe. But for the rest of you, I got mine. Get yours.
Right. Really interesting. And I've sort of come to that conclusion too, that, it's like the people that need to come into our vibration will show up. We don't have
Yes.
we don't have to go get them. The ones that need to come. And then someday you'll have to come to the Casa de Santa Maria.
Oh, I will. Oh, yes. It'll be this season. So it's already in my field.
Okay, good, 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 good. Energetically, so because all the stories here. So let's go back to what experience you had on Mount Shasta. What that was life changing. Even though you've done this life changing experience already, um, and you were getting the energy that you probably didn't know, but it raised your vibration for you to have this experience. So share a little bit about that experience that, and it may not, it may take a while or it may take, but you know what I mean? It's like whatever you want to share there.
It's the Capricorn in me doesn't want to leave out any of the details
That's
because
fine.
when you understand all of the little pieces that the universe had to line up, then you're really able to see the miraculous part of all of this. Because I'm going to have what I won't understand at the time is a multi-dimensional experience. All I know, and I won't understand this idea of a portal until I've experienced it. And even then, it'll take me a couple of times to repeat what happened. Not that I was really, when I came out of Telos and over the next few days, when I was trying to find touchstones, I wasn't going around bragging about this visit I'd had. I was trying to find someone who could tell me more about what the hell just happened. But it leaked out. And over time, a little bit more came out. It wouldn't be until months later that I would really understand what took place and what led up to that. How in the hell, at the end of the month, were you able to go in? Well, when I replayed back what had happened while I was there, and I wasn't following any trail. I was just being guided to different places, and it didn't matter. I would just love to just lavish out here. I didn't need to do anything, just had to be in it. And that's what every day ended up being. When you got used to that vibration, that's all you wanted. I won't really understand until months later that my vibration was rising every day I was there on the mountain. And all I wanted to do every day was be on the mountain. I didn't have to really go anywhere or hike, but there were lots of places I discovered. We just think of Shasta as this mountain over there. Well, she has a sister mountain next to her, which is where really my experience took place was on Shastina. Then there's Black Butte over here, which, in my opinion, if you look at her in the distance, she looks like the tip of a crystal. That just whatever dirt's on her, you just blow it away, and you'd see the tip of like a big, huge quartz crystal. In my mind, she's there to amplify what Shasta emits. But there is lava tubes everywhere. Pluto's cave is nearby. How many waterfalls are there that are magnificent around the area? We didn't know about any of that. But every place is energetically charged. And so, man, I'm just overwhelmed by it all. Anyway, this last weekend when it actually took place, there were a few places I had not been that I'd heard about. One of them, which when I have visited now, I don't know why it took me so long to find it. There's a place within Mount Shasta called the Gateway Peace Garden. It's so beautiful and peaceful. And if you find it on the web, which is where I found it first, that does not do this little parcel justice. And the magic that's in these little sections and all of the peace flags that have been left behind by thousands of people that have visited and all the crystals that have been left behind, it's just magical. So I finally, this weekend when all of this was going to unfold, had visited there first on Friday and spent at least an hour there and just loved it. And then I was going to go back up to this spot on the mountain that I always return to. There's a trailhead there called Old Ski Bowl Trail, and it's as high as you can drive on the mountain. So when you get up to the top parking lot at the beginning of this trailhead, you're at just under 8,000 feet. You can climb to 10, the peak is at 12. You can get there from this space, but I've always loved this area. The views are incredible, and just the energy up there is interesting. You, when I learned more about that face of it, in the early 90s, there had been an avalanche there. We don't think that they happen this often, but one happened there, and you can clearly see all the evidence of where there used to be trees and rocks. Yeah, none of that's there. But down around where I was hiking is where a lot of this began to collect once it's stripped down. And so when I started my hike around there, I didn't really appreciate the landscape I was seeing. This was relatively new growth. And when I would see what were energetic places that were calling to me, it would almost always be a tree that looked like it had rocks wrapped around it. And later, the second year, I'll appreciate that there's a bunch of greenery that's growing around this and no other places. When you think of, yes, this was um, an avalanche zone, all of this had been wiped out before. So why? How did this get here? It looked like it was almost intentionally planned, but of course it wasn't. But of course it was. So um, as I was sensing the energy in these places, I was doing what any light worker does. You plant your energy there, and then you move on to the next place. Well, when I started to do that on this particular hike, there was a spot I saw, and I was still kind of scanning while I had made my intention to stop here. And when I saw another just over to my left, but a little bit higher, it looked interesting. And so I moved there, and I was going to begin the process again. And so then there's one last time. I'm almost up to where the mountain is. And from where I'm standing, probably, 15 or so feet in front of me, I can see where there are these three boulders that come out from the mountain and form almost like, well, I don't know, call it a little patio. It looked interesting to me, so I got closer to that, and the boulder on the left-hand side from where I was looking was narrow, and a little bit higher than my inseam, so I could crawl up over it and get inside this little space. When I turned around, I'm looking back over in the distance. I can see all the tiny cars from where I parked and where I walked, but nobody, unless you knew where I was, no one was going to know where I was, what I was doing. So I began by planting my light, like I always do. And then I sat down and I leaned up against the mountain. I was listening to music. I was having some water and some grapes. And when I had finished my refreshments and put them away, all of a sudden the music stopped. Well, I always carry my phone in my back pocket. And so when I leaned up to pull it out of my pocket and looked at it, there's no power. And so as I'm trying to turn the power back on, I feel a breeze from behind me. Now, I'd been leaning up against a rock, and once I felt this sensation, I turned around, and there's a hole taller than I am, and I'm 6 feet tall. It kind of rounded out. And so I turn and stand up, and because it's dark. This is noon for all intents and purposes, and it's a sunny day. So the sun's shining down where I am, and as my eyes begin to adjust, it looks as though there's kind of a rise where I'm standing, and then it goes downward, and later it'll make sense. This was a lava tube at some point. but it looks like there's somebody down there. And as soon as I have that thought in my head, somebody says, "Do you wish to see Telos?" So the adrenaline kicks in and you have a little bit of anxiety, but oh, yes, I came here to see things, and started to make my way down. When I thought I could see more, when the light was adjusting, it looked like there was another person down there, and I was just guessing that they're about my height. As I got closer, this person was not my height. This person was like two heads taller than I was at least, and they were dressed in this like white, um, like a frock, like it's not a robe. I don't know how you describe it. Um, he had some ribbons, they looked like, that were different colors on his garb. And as I got closer, he said, "You can call me Alex." I said, "Well, that'll be easy to remember. That's my son's name." He says, "Yeah, we know about your son. Follow me." And we began down this incline, and down ahead of us, I can see that there's, a small section of light in whatever we're heading toward. As we're going along, he's telling me about the levels in Telos, how many there are. He tells me about the nature of the council, about King and Queen Ra and Ranamu and their involvement. And as we get closer to the bottom, I look behind me now and I can't see anything. It's dark. It'll take me a while to understand that was the portal they opened, and that's how you got into this space. Physical as fourth dimension, and fifth dimension still is. I'm boots on the ground in just a higher frame of dimension that my vibration has prepared me for. So when we get to this space, it opens up into what I call a staging area because I don't know what else to call it. And there are other opening tubes directly in front of me over that way. But more interestingly, off to my left, there is this platform that's like 6 foot by 6 foot and appears to have like two bucket seats on it. There's another one off to the left, and there's another one over here on my right. And after I start to take all this in, well, Alex has made his way into like the driver's seat, on the other side, and indicates for me to sit next to him. And as soon as my butt hits that seat, this thing levitates and off it goes. Picks the middle spot over there, and now there's light coming from the opposite side from wherever we're going. He continues to tell me more about Telos on the way there, but I'm watching the walls of this tube. Clearly, there's crystals embedded in this wall, and every time the light hits it, it refracts it, and every inch you move, it changes the refraction. It's like you're inside of a kaleidoscope that I never wanted to end. But all of a sudden, we're at our destination, and this opens up. He takes this craft and raises it up above. So you've seen cityscape photos. This is what I'm seeing of the first level of Telos. It's circular in orientation. There's a huge white pyramid in the middle of all the rest of this crystal temples and buildings around it. But there are some other things that I noticed. First of all, it looks like daylight in here. It's well lit, but I look up and I can't see the top of whatever I assume I'm in a cave. Well, I can't be in a cave. I can't see the top of this. It's lit like it's daylight, but there's no beam of sunlight coming in here ever. So, how did that happen? Later, it'll occur to me that even what I've seen and the structures I've seen and the people standing around, there have been no shadows cast. So, how does that light happen? Well, I'll understand months later the technology where you can infuse a crystal. Um, Quartz works quite well for this purpose, and it can be charged electromagnetically to hold that light in it and it lasts for a 500,000 years, 500,000 years before it can no longer be served in that purpose, and it just becomes inert material. This is how they light everything else up here, and the crystal responds to your intent. So you can have like a circadian, like a 24-hour cycle within the environment by your intent. And we all have that inside of us to do this. We're co-creators. They live in an environment where they can do that. So um, once we look at the top level, he brings our craft down, and we're kind of hovering over wherever we're heading to the next place. And I can see there's, a couple of people here, there's three people over there, and those that I can see close enough that I can see their face, it's like I can make eye contact with them long enough to know that, man, they're familiar. I know them. And more importantly, they know me. I just got that sense with the five or six people that I had kind of scanned over as we were going through here. Place was familiar to me. So now we find ourselves on the third level of five. We're not going to visit them all. I'm going to see the first level, I'm going to see the third level, and he'll describe what's on the other three. The last one I really want to come back and see. But here is all of the hydroponic gardens that serve this collective community. Explain that I'm looking at about 7 acres from our perspective right here, and it feeds the population. So I had to take months to digest what that really meant. Because in my little 3D mind, I'm trying to think of, even if those crops perpetuated themselves quicker, like they claim it does, how does it feed all of the people here? And in my mind, I'm still thinking, not that I live by 3 meals a day, but if you're putting out that kind of food, there's a lot of people here. So let's stop for a second. And what I understand population wise, what is here on the planet? It's my understanding that at the time of the fall, when Lemuria sunk quickly, they had made provisions in Shasta, moved all the records and what they needed to there by then, and had made provisions for 2,000,000. 25,000 made it because it happened so quickly at the end. Somehow, over time, when I became familiar with the subject a few years ago, I became familiar with there were 1.2 million Lemurians within Telos, is how it had been described to me. Since then, I now understand that there are 4.8 million of us, all in different forms, some of us on the surface, some of us below the surface, all Lemurians here waiting for the shift. It looks like you wanted to say something and I could use a drink.
Cool, good. I was just going to tell you as you're describing, I'm sitting over here crying. Don't know why I'm crying.
It resonates with all of us like we're home. It's not a sad cry at all because I have the same thing.
It's
And
home.
there's,
The word, that's what I'm feeling. It's home.
yes,
And I think a lot of us, and I think for me, is that I miss home. I miss it really bad being in this third dimension. And
yeah.
that's what I'm feeling is, oh, that's home. And so, for whatever it's worth, I just want to share that.
Well, I could spend time on just that topic. What I would love to tell you is that it's one of your homes. And when I didn't really understand the nature of multiple timelines, which we can all reach out into, it's damn likely, if not probable, that you've had similar reincarnations in Atlantean cultures as well. I'm coming back into embracing all that because there's been more of that energy that's been placed in my path in the last month too. And reminders that as wonderful it is that Lemurian energy is returning, yes, the Atlanteans got a bad rap because they were kind of the cause of the fall the last time around, but that doesn't mean that all of them were dark. And they have as much technology to share with us on the surface as do the Lemurians. So that's a topic for another day. But if anybody resonates with any of that, there's a reason why it does, and there's a reason why it should. You're probably privy to a lot of that stuff too. So get ready. All of us, I feel, carry pieces of like the Atlantean and Lemurian puzzles. And when we come together, that's when we share them and we see the puzzle come together. I had a vision a couple months ago that when more tribe were showing up, it was like I was meeting them in the um, halls of Amenti. And when I would see them there, they were finally in a place where they could go over and find their own records. And when they did, when they finally touched it on the shelf, it like activated them. In my mind, it was like that whole shelf just lit up and they had access to it all over again, all of their records. But here's the cool part: as soon as they connected to theirs, every other collective record that was at the same vibration also lit up. So here is where, when I suggest that when you get to this level and you offer your Akashic records, they combine with everybody else's sooner or later, and now that's the access you have. So these 3D lessons that you've been learning, that no one else has been learning, and sticking into your Akashic records, thank you for the lessons you had to learn, good and bad, for all the rest of us. And you're welcome for the ones I contributed. That's how it works. So to me, there are more people showing up. Ever since that interview on Ethereal Edge, you and 195,000 other people have viewed it. How does that happen on a platform that doesn't do that? There was a reason why that went out and attracted who it did and how it did. It's time for the rest of the tribe to show up on places in the planet that they're awakening to as well.
Right. Yeah. And I also feel like even this whole conversation is an activation. Um, I mean, it certainly is for me, because all of a sudden I'm starting to put together the dots, about the vortex that opened up here and where it came from and why now and that kind of thing. I don't fully understand it, but I do feel like that this place, you're sharing this information is an activation in itself. So,
I'm glad to hear that. It took me a while to see it as such, but I'm so busy trying to translate it so I can understand it.
right.
I don't really see what other people get out of it, or I didn't at the time. I clearly see it now. And like I was saying before, when I've had interactions with people and they've had that kind of reaction to me, like, yeah, you've got something I need to get from you. Um, I appreciate it. It's not an ego thing with me. I could care less about views and likes and clicks and all of that. I'll tell you what does gratify me is those people that are showing up are the right ones.
Mm-hmm.
They get it. We can have these conversations because they're experiencers. I'm done and have been done for a long time listening to talking heads talking about other people's experiences because there's enough experiencers out there themselves who, first of all, just like I was, are looking for somebody, some touchstone to have these questions answered on what happened to me. And more people are showing up. Well, to me, that tells me that no effort is being overlooked by our guides and our higher influences. Every opportunity they can take to get our attention, they're doing it. Whether it's synchronicity in numbers you keep seeing, or a song, or a phrase, or whatever it is, a color, a symbol, anything they can do to get your attention right now to help you focus on where we're going is what their objective is right now. And that's why I spend so much time talking about it, not to convince anybody about anything. Either you're going to resonate just like you did when I was telling you about Lemuria, or you won't. And if you don't, I send you love and light anyway. I still know at a level we're connected. Whether you get it or not is your individual journey. And if I look at it from that perspective, why would I want to get in the way of somebody achieving their mastery no matter what it is? It's not mine. And I hope that when they show up for the tribe, it's unique and it just fits in the fabric of what everybody else can do. That's when I can appreciate none of us were supposed to be exactly the same.
Well, I feel like I've kept you long enough, but can we do a part two? We've left a cliffhanger of you.
Well, I'm going to conclude this. I
Okay.
know I can do it in 3 minutes, and I'm looking at the clock, so it'll be like 9. We'll finish this part, and then we will have future conversations for sure. So when this was all finished, and I had seen what I'd seen on the third level, and had an appreciation. Oh, just to kind of cap that off, the Lemurians have a different form. They've achieved their crystalline forms already. They're not carbon forms like we are. And there's another seed for me to plant with all of you. You are already being cellularly prepared for this enhancement in light that we have all been bombarded by. And when Earth shifts into her new consciousness level, your body will be able to adapt. They're already at that adaptation. So they eat because they like to eat, not because their form requires it from a maintenance perspective. It's not like that. So now I totally get it. This doesn't have to feed people 3 meals a day. Uh, It, I came to terms with. Anyway, so let's conclude this quickly. The last place we're going to stop is a place I noticed when we were hovering over. There was like this circular building in kind of the front end of everything I had seen in the scene. It turns out that this circular room is the council chambers. And when we came back and rode this hovercraft over to it, we dropped down by it, and you can tell it's circular, but there are all these crystal panels that made this building, and the opening was the equivalent of like French doors, but there's no doors there. On this panel and this panel, however, there were some light codes that were inscripted into them that looked familiar to me. And when I had seen them and said that to Alex, I had seen a shop in Mount Shasta, Blue Star Child Gallery, where I had seen these inscriptions. They were drawn, and they take months to do because they're 3 feet wide and 10 feet long and perfectly symmetrical in every way, drawn by this gifted little Japanese artist named Haruko. They were inscribed here. I'd seen them in her shop in Shasta, and when I asked about them, Alex said, "Yeah, those are accurate. That is the new angelic blueprint, which is the human DNA platform, and that is New Earth over there." So we move into this space, and what I can see is there's a round table, the only wooden I've seen here so far, and there's 13 chairs around it. But what I notice more than this is there's a feeling in this space that I'm getting that hits me. And I remember this better than lots of other experiences in my life. There was just this sensation I got, like there was the biggest hug, the most satisfying hug you've ever received, was like this sensation that kept pressing into my heart space the entire time I'm in this room. And I'm thinking, if this is the council chambers, what a wonderful way to soften people up before decision making has to take place. While this is happening, 5 more people enter this space. I can tell that the tallest person who's in the middle looks like the pictures of Adama we've seen. That's Adama. The other four people flanking him are females. I'll learn that they're all members of the council. They invite me to take a seat. Four of them sit on, there's three of them sit on this side, three of them sit on this side, and each one of them tells me a little bit about themselves. They tell me their name, kind of what role they play quickly, and how they got to the council. I will, of course, remember Alex, and I'll remember Adama, and I will remember the first woman whose name was told was Shyama, because Shyama is going to chair this meeting for the duration of it after this point. She begins to tell me why this is taking place. So this was in July of 2020. The Lemurians have been preparing for this time when this rejoining of the surface and below the surface was going to take place again. They protected their vibration religiously ever since so that it would never be dropped into this density ever again, which is why they've kept themselves secluded the way that they did. But they're at a stage now when they recognize that this shift, which wasn't going to be manifested by all of us kumbayaing together, no, Earth is about to shift into her next gear. And that, in my mind, was the cosmic reset that was going to have to take place on Earth for her course to be righted. We weren't going to find enough to kumbaya together to have humans do that. It was going to take a cosmic reset, and that's exactly what's happening. Because in a moment, Earth is no longer going to support lower vibrations, and we're all preparing ourselves to match the vibration she is going to be at. If we're having these discussions and we've seen angels and had any kind of contact with our higher beings, you are on path, gang. We're not done in this environment of 3D crap going on, but we're done with the lessons. And so now we're preparing ourselves and doing what we can to share with those that get it, the direction we're going. Not that I have a map, because my map is entirely different from yours, but we're all going the same place, guys. And what I can't explain enough is the idea of this next dimension. My words fail me to describe where that is, but it's as tangible as anything. And I've just been blessed by more tribes showing up, telling me authentic stories of their own experiences. So every time they do, it's just more validating for my own. Everybody else is having these same experiences and explaining it to us. So that's great. Anyway, so they, in their timeline, in my mind, it was winter solstice 2020. Over the last several months, I had come to the same conclusions to understand whatever the solar phenomenon that was going to take place, where did that emanate from? And when I could understand what was actually coming from the central sun and affecting everything in its enhanced proton belt that we're in, where this is the higher light energy we're being bombarded with, and we're in the cycle for the next 2,000 years. We finally are in the age of Aquarius, the golden age we've been talking about. We're here, and now our solar system has been bathing in this for a while now. We're getting used to these vibrations. Why do you think everybody's questioning it? And the chaos that we've been talking about coming, take your pick. There's plenty of it to choose from. Here it is, just like we've been told. But we also see the corrective measures that are taking place. So if you tune out all this crappy 3D white noise, boy, you can see what's coming. And holy cow, does it feel awesome? Earth is getting to a new vibration level, but at the cost of things here on the planet. Because every time she takes another jolt from the sun, that electromagnetic energy has to go somewhere. And we see it really profoundly when it hits the poles and it turns into pretty lights. We think that that's all it is. She just took a proton blast from the sun, and that's how it expresses when it hits the poles, but it's going to the core and then it's going to get expressed somewhere else. So now you can understand, appreciate all the seismic activity that's taking place, thinking that we're in solar maximum. There are any any day, there's at least an average of 100 sunspots on the Earth facing side of the sun right now. And we're in this situation, according to scientists, until solar maximum is over sometime in 2026. To me, the conditions are perfect for this to play out right now. So that's my perspective. That's where I come from. So Siama was going to go on to tell me why me, because I was definitely interested in this. And the first thing she said is, she said, well, first of all, we can tell that you can hold fifth dimensional awareness, consciousness. Now, I didn't really understand what that meant. I had heard the phrase and I understood the concept, but I really hadn't ingested that myself then. I totally understand what it means now, but man, it was good to hear. Secondly, she said, we also know you're the protector of Gaia. Remember when I mentioned that ayahuasca trip that I had an opportunity to do back in 2018? That's what Mother Ayahuasca had told me I was. I didn't utter that phrase since then. I've uttered it a couple of times in these things since then, but how did they know that? I didn't tell anybody, and I didn't go to the ayahuasca journeys with any of my friends. So nobody was there to express this. They knew. And then the third was that they were hoping that when the opportunity came for the reunion of what's on the surface and what's beneath, that I would serve as an emissary. Now, that I have an expanded idea of what that means. And even at that time, I knew I wasn't going to be the only one. There were going to be others that were going to show up that resonated with Lemurian energies, and they would be here to do the same kind of baton passing when the time came. And they wanted to know that I would do that. Well, in my mind, the first thing in my little 3D mind wanted to process was, why me? Well, I didn't say that out loud because I didn't want that energy to get out there, but I somehow hemmed and hawed my way through. I would be honored. Um, and the meeting was over. They got their answer. So they got up and they bowed and they moved off. And Alex and I moved out, hopped back on that hovercraft, and made our way back to that staging area. I hadn't said really anything until I answered the council. I wanted to watch, listen, take everything in while I was there, but I did have a couple questions. And here's what they are. One, can I tell anybody about this? And Alex kind of laughed. He said, we want you to tell people. We want people to know that we are here and that this is just isn't a legend or it's not a fantasy. And the second was, will I get to come back? And he smiled and he said, yeah, you get to come back before the shift. And that was kind of where it ended. The next thing I remember is coming back to in the spot I was before it opened up. And it'll take me about 40 minutes, I guess, to get from there back to the car. But the whole trip over there is like a blur until I get to the parking lot. And that's when the reality of it's a Sunday afternoon. You can imagine the parking lot is full. There's families and couples and kids. They're all hiking in different places. And no one here has any idea where I just came from.
This has been delightful, and thank you for the activation. I hope that it does the same for many and it'll draw those folks as well. Um,
Yes.
I don't feel our conversation has ended, and we'll know when the right time is to pick up where we left off.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, let's get it on. Let's get this thing
Well,
moving.
here I'm just gonna. This is a teaser for whoever's going to listen to this in your crowd that might not have heard any of these things about me before. When I had put this Telos experience into perspective as a multidimensional experience, I won't really understand that until the second year when I return to Shasta, and I'll have encounters with a hybrid, a true hybrid, and she's going to introduce me to light beings that I'm going to have encounters with, activations with, and then it'll be photographed. That's my second multidimensional experience. And after that, after a few months, is when it finally came into perspective. There's going to be lots of these extraordinary things that are going to happen. These are the ones that happened to you so far, but that's what they are. You, I feel a need to help people understand the nature of multidimensionality. And so by explaining what's happened with me and getting a kind of an idea what's possible, you probably had your own, and now it's just a matter of spending enough intent on it to get it back. As I pointed out before, every opportunity to get your attention is now you're being tapped on the shoulder by your higher guides constantly, hoping that you're going to pay attention before the clock ticks.
Very good. Very good. Well, we'll
So we'll leave that as the teaser for your
for
people.
the
How's
next one.
that?
I really
Yes.
appreciate it and know you're loved, and we will see you out here when we see you.
Thank you, honey. Thanks again.
All right. Have a great day. Take
You
care.
too. Bye bye.
Bye.